You think she lost interest slowly, but the truth is you killed it in one moment without even realizing. You're not losing women because you lack attraction. You're losing them because you're doing too much. You're not losing women because you're not attractive enough. That's the lie most men believe. The real reason is much simpler and much harder to accept. You're doing too much talking, too much trying, too much explaining yourself. And when you do too much, you change the entire emotional balance. Attraction doesn't grow in effort, it grows in space. She won't explain this, but she feels it. The moment you start trying to secure her, something inside her shifts. Not because she hates effort, but because effort without calm energy feels like pressure, and pressure kills curiosity. At first, she might be interested. There's a small spark, a moment where she feels something different about you. Not logic, emotion, but then most men make the same mistake. They notice that moment and they try to increase it. They text more, they talk more, they try to make it real too fast, and that's exactly where everything breaks, because attraction is not built through acceleration. It's built through control, the ability to stay calm when something starts forming, the ability to let the moment exist without forcing it forward. When you try too hard, you shift from presence to need, and she feels that instantly, not as a thought, but as a change in energy. The mystery disappears, the tension disappears, and suddenly she doesn't feel the same pull anymore. This is what most men never understand. She wasn't losing interest slowly. She was reacting to your reaction. Because she was still in the phase of feeling, not deciding, not committing, just observing, just sensing. And when you rushed that phase, you interrupted it. You turned emotion into expectation, and expectation removes curiosity. Attraction doesn't survive in clarity too early. It needs uncertainty, it needs space, it needs the feeling that something is there, but not fully defined yet. That's what makes her think about you when you're not around. That's what keeps you in her mind, not effort, but emotional tension. And here's the truth most men avoid. The more you try to make her stay, the faster she feels the need to leave. Because your energy starts saying one thing, I need this to work, and neediness is not attractive. It never was. The real shift happens when you stop trying to force outcomes, when you stop chasing validation, when you stop turning every interaction into something serious too fast, because now you're not reacting. You're just being, and that changes everything. When your presence feels stable, she relaxes. When she relaxes, she opens up. And when she opens up, attraction starts to grow naturally, not because you did more, but because you stopped interfering with what was already building. Most men lose women at the exact moment they try to secure them, not later, not after mistakes, right there in that first emotional shift. Because they don't understand one thing, attraction is not created by chasing. There's a moment that feels almost unreal when it happens, like something between you and her quietly changes, but neither of you talks about it. It's not a confession, it's not a clear signal, it's just a shift in energy. 1 second, things feel normal, and the next, there's a slight pause in the way she responds, a softness in her attention, a kind of curiosity that wasn't there before. And in that moment, something very human happens inside you. You feel it too, a small rush, a sense that something is happening here. And that feeling can be powerful because it makes you want to hold on to it, to protect it, to make sure it doesn't disappear. But this is exactly where emotion starts to get complicated, because what she is experiencing is still delicate. It's not love, not attachment, not decision. It's a feeling that hasn't taken shape yet. It's open, undefined, and still safe in its uncertainty. And what most men do in that exact emotional window is react too strongly, not in an obvious or aggressive way, but emotionally. They start trying to stabilize it. They become slightly more intense, slightly more attentive, slightly more focused on not losing it. And that change, even if it feels small from your side, is felt immediately on her side, because she wasn't asking for certainty yet. She was still in the phase of feeling it without naming it. And when you try to turn that fragile emotional space into something solid too quickly, it creates pressure. Not spoken pressure, emotional pressure, the kind you can't see, but you can feel in the tone, in the timing, in the shift of how natural everything used to feel. And once that pressure enters, something subtle happens in her mind. The curiosity that was pulling her in starts to lose its softness. The ease she felt around you begins to tighten. The emotional openness that was slowly forming starts to retreat, not because she decided to leave, but because the feeling no longer feels weightless. An attraction, especially at that early stage, only survives in lightness. She won't tell you this directly. She might not even consciously understand it herself, but she will feel the difference. The same interaction that felt effortless a moment ago starts to feel slightly different. Less free, less uncertain, less emotionally open-ended, and in human psychology, that shift is enough to change direction completely. Because what was growing through curiosity stops growing when it starts feeling controlled. Not because she lost interest in you as a person, but because the emotional atmosphere that created the interest no longer exists in the same way. There's a very specific kind of mistake that doesn't look like a mistake at all in the moment. It feels like interest, it feels like progress, it feels like you're finally doing something right. But emotionally, it's the point where things quietly start to break. It happens when you sense that she is slightly more engaged than before. Maybe she replies a little faster, maybe her tone softens, maybe the conversation doesn't feel completely one-sided anymore. And inside you, something reacts to that, not loudly, not consciously, but emotionally. You feel a shift, like, okay, now it's working, and that's where the danger begins. Because the human mind naturally tries to stabilize good moments. When something starts feeling positive, we instinctively want to protect it, keep it going, make sure it doesn't slip away. So you adjust, you become a bit more present, a bit more available, a bit more expressive. You lean into the moment instead of letting it breathe. But what you don't realize is this: what she was feeling was still soft, not fixed, not decided, not grounded. Just a temporary emotional opening, a fragile state where curiosity is active but still uncommitted. And when you increase intensity too quickly, even slightly, you change the emotional temperature of that space. What was light starts to feel defined. What was undefined starts to feel like it's becoming something. What was naturally unfolding starts to feel directed, and that subtle shift changes everything inside her. Because attraction in that stage doesn't need acceleration, it needs continuity, it needs emotional breathing room. It needs the feeling that nothing is being forced into shape too early. But when you respond with too much energy, too much focus, too much intention, you remove that breathing room without even noticing it. And the result is not immediate rejection, it's emotional withdrawal. She doesn't suddenly leave, she doesn't suddenly change completely. It's quieter than that. Her responses become slightly more controlled, the natural flow reduces, the ease that was building doesn't deepen anymore, it flattens. And from your side, it feels confusing because you didn't do something wrong. You actually tried to do more of what seemed to be working. But in reality, you didn't need more action. You needed stillness, because that early emotional stage wasn't asking to be enhanced. It was asking to be left alone long enough to grow on its own. And when that doesn't happen, the feeling doesn't explode or end dramatically. It just slowly stops expanding. And that slow stopping is what most men never notice until it's already gone. There is a moment in connection where everything looks completely normal on the outside, but inside, the emotional direction has already started shifting. It's subtle, almost impossible to point out in real time. She is still there, still replying, still engaging. Nothing obvious changes, but something in the quality of the interaction changes. And this is where most men misunderstand what is happening, because they assume consistency means stability. They think as long as she is still responding, everything is still going well, but attraction doesn't work in a straight line like that. It moves in waves, and in one of those waves, there's a fragile phase where she is not fully attached, but she is also not detached. She is in between, emotionally open, but still observing. In that state, she is not making decisions. She is feeling possibilities, and this is the most sensitive stage of all. Because she hasn't committed to anything yet, her emotional system is still evaluating the experience. She is paying attention to how she feels around you, not what you are saying, the tone, the timing, the pressure, the ease, and when everything stays natural, unforced, and light, that emotional space slowly expands. She feels more comfortable, more curious, more open without realizing why. But the moment that space is interrupted, not by something dramatic, but by subtle shifts, everything changes internally. Maybe you start responding faster than before. Maybe you start adding more effort into your replies. Maybe your energy becomes slightly more focused on keeping her engaged. From your side, it feels like improvement. From her side, it feels like pressure entering a space that was still forming, and that's where emotional withdrawal begins. Not because she decided to pull away, but because the feeling that was growing no longer has the same freedom to expand. It's like something soft suddenly becomes structured too early, and when emotional experiences are forced into structure before they are ready, they lose their natural depth. That's why she doesn't suddenly disappear. She just stops leaning in. The curiosity that was pulling her closer becomes neutral again. The emotional openness becomes cautious, the effortless flow becomes controlled, and you don't notice the exact moment it changes because nothing obvious happens. But internally, the direction has already shifted, and this is the part that makes it so confusing afterward. Because you will remember everything as almost working, but in reality, what was happening was a fragile emotional process that needed space, not interference. And the moment that space was no longer preserved, the growth stopped quietly, without warning, and without a clear ending. There's a point in attraction where everything still looks normal, but internally the direction has already changed. She is still replying, still engaging, still present in the conversation. But presence does not always mean progression, and this is where most men get misled because they confuse access with interest. Just because she is still there does not mean she is still moving toward you emotionally. At the early stage of attraction, she is not fully invested yet. She is testing the emotional experience not consciously, but instinctively. She is noticing how it feels to talk to you, how it feels when you respond, how it feels when there is silence, how it feels when there is attention, and when there is absence. And in that process, she is not looking for perfection. She is looking for emotional rhythm and natural flow, a sense that nothing is being forced, a feeling that she can exist in the interaction without pressure to define it. But the moment that rhythm gets disrupted, something shifts internally, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly. When you start trying to keep it going, too much, more messages, more effort, more presence than the moment requires, the emotional rhythm changes. What was once balanced starts feeling slightly heavier. What was once light starts feeling slightly directed. What was once flowing starts feeling managed, and she feels that difference even if she doesn't consciously recognize it. Because attraction at this stage is not logical, it's sensory. It's about how the interaction feels, not what is being said. And when the feeling changes from natural to slightly intentional, something inside her becomes more reserved. Not because she lost interest in you, but because the experience lost its ease, and ease is what allows curiosity to grow. Without ease, curiosity doesn't deepen, it flattens. This is why you can do everything right on the surface and still feel things slipping away. Because nothing visible changes, but emotionally the interaction stops expanding, It stops building momentum. It stops creating that quiet pull that makes her think about you when you're not there. And once that internal momentum stops, it rarely restarts in the same way. Not because something broke, but because something stopped growing at the exact moment it needed space, not direction. And that is the part most men never realize until after the feeling is already gone. There's a stage in attraction where nothing looks wrong, but something has already stopped moving forward. She is still there, still responding, still part of the interaction, but emotionally, she is no longer leaning in the same way. And this shift is so subtle that most men completely miss it, because there is no rejection, no argument, no obvious change, just a quiet reduction in emotional pull, and this is where the misunderstanding begins. Most men think attraction is about maintaining consistency, keeping the conversation alive, staying present, not disappearing. But real attraction doesn't depend on constant presence. It depends on emotional expansion. At the beginning, there is a small window where she is open to feeling something new. She is not fully attached, not fully detached. She is simply experiencing. In that state, every interaction carries emotional weight. Every response, every pause, every tone contributes to how she feels around you. And if the experience stays light, natural, and unforced, that emotional openness grows quietly. But if something shifts that balance even slightly, the expansion slows down, not because she made a decision, but because the emotional environment changed. Maybe the energy becomes more focused, maybe the attention becomes more intense, maybe the interaction starts feeling like it has direction instead of flow. And even though none of this is dramatic, her internal experience changes instantly, because what she was drawn to wasn't effort, it was ease inside uncertainty. The feeling that something is there, but not being forced into definition. That space is where attraction lies. But when that space gets filled too quickly with intention, the emotional system reacts differently. She doesn't reject you. She doesn't pull away completely. She simply stops leaning forward, and that small shift changes everything. Because when she is leaning in, even slightly, the connection feels alive, there is curiosity, there is emotional movement, there is anticipation without certainty, but when she stops leaning in, the interaction becomes static, still happening but no longer growing, and from your perspective, this is the most confusing phase. Because nothing bad happened, you didn't lose her in a dramatic moment, you just slowly stopped feeling the same emotional response from her. And that's because attraction didn't collapse, it simply stopped expanding at the exact point where it needed more space, not more input. And once emotional expansion stops, it rarely restarts in the same natural way again. Attraction usually doesn't fail because you did something wrong later. It collapses much earlier, in a moment you don't even recognize. There's a very specific shift that happens when a woman first feels curiosity or emotional pull toward a man. It's subtle, almost invisible. Nothing dramatic changes on the surface. The conversation still looks normal. She might still smile, still reply, still stay engaged. But internally, something has already started forming, a soft emotional attention, a quiet awareness of you. Not logic, just feeling, and this is the part most men completely miss, because instead of letting that moment stay light, natural, and unforced, they try to strengthen it immediately. They increase effort, they add more words, they start performing instead of simply being present. From his perspective, he thinks he's improving the connection. From her perspective, something very different happens. The emotional space she was just starting to explore suddenly feels filled. The uncertainty that created curiosity disappears. The slow, invisible tension that makes someone interesting gets replaced with clarity too early. And clarity, at that stage, doesn't feel safe or attractive, it feels heavy. What she was feeling was not certainty, not decision, not commitment. It was exploration, a small internal pull that needs time to breathe before it becomes anything real. But when you rush into it emotionally, when you try to define it, secure it, or intensify it, you interrupt that natural development. You take something fragile and force structure onto it before it's ready, and in that interruption, the feeling doesn't fail, it fades. Not because she consciously decides to leave, but because the emotional environment that created attraction is no longer there. That's why it feels confusing afterward. From your point of view, nothing major happened, no fight, no rejection, no obvious mistake, just a gradual cooling that seems random, but it wasn't random at all. It was the moment you stopped letting the emotion exist freely and started trying to control its direction. Attraction, at its earliest stage, is extremely sensitive to pressure. Even subtle changes in tone, attention, or intention can shift how it develops. What was meant to grow in silence gets pulled into expectation too early, and when expectation enters, curiosity exits. That's the real turning point. Most men never notice not a rejection, not a loss, but a disruption of timing. Because attraction doesn't just depend on what you do, it depends on when you do it.